The air was full of smoke and sparks. Captain Daniel Reed crouched low behind a pile of broken metal, his pulse hammering in his ears. The space station's alarms wailed in a long broken cry, red lights flashing down every corridor. Somewhere above him, the enemy ships still pounded the station with heavy fire. Each impact shook the walls and sent fresh showers of dust falling onto his shoulders. Daniel knew he had only minutes left before the station's hull gave way. And in those minutes he had to find her, the alien princess. She wasn't just royalty. She was the last heir of the Aelori people, a civilization already crushed under the weight of an enemy empire. Her capture would mean their complete extinction. And somehow, by strange twists of fate and duty, it had fallen on a single human soldier to find her and get her out alive. The odds were impossible, but Daniel didn't waste time thinking about odds. He only thought about survival and the promise he had made. The corridor ahead was choked with smoke, the ceiling half collapsed. He slipped his helmet's visor down and pushed through, careful to keep low. The floor was slick with leaking coolant, glowing faintly in the dark. Somewhere close, he heard the rapid clatter of enemy boots, the armored soldiers of the Dravik. They were hunting, too. Daniel pressed himself against the wall and waited. His breath came slow and steady. A squad of 3 Dravik warriors stalked past, their tall bodies covered in jagged armor, their eyes glowing like red coals. He held his rifle tight, but he didn't fire. Not yet. When the last soldier passed, Daniel moved, quick as lightning. He lunged out from the shadows, silent, and struck. One blow to the helmet with the butt of his rifle sent the rearmost soldier sprawling. Before the others could react, Daniel squeezed the trigger. 2 shots, clean and sharp. The squad dropped where they stood. Silence returned, heavy and tense. Daniel knelt by the nearest body, checking quickly for intel. Nothing useful. The Dravik carried only weapons and orders to kill. He moved again, deeper into the burning station. His communicator buzzed softly in his ear. "Reed," a voice whispered. "You're almost there. Royal Chamber 50 meters north. Hurry, the fire is spreading." He tapped the side of his helmet. "Copy, on the way." His boots echoed faintly on the metal floor as he advanced. The air grew hotter, smoke thicker. Somewhere ahead, a massive blast had torn open the wall, exposing the cold stars beyond. Only emergency shields kept the void from sucking everything out. The edges of the tier glowed with molten red, and there, in the center of the ruined chamber, stood a figure. Tall, graceful, her silver-white hair glowing faintly in the firelight. The alien princess waited. She was dressed in flowing battle silk, the colors of her house dimmed with soot and ash. Yet her eyes, luminous blue and sharp with intelligence, fixed on Daniel as he entered. "You came," she said softly, her voice carrying even through the smoke. Daniel gave a small nod. "Let's move. The station's collapsing." But before either of them could take a step, the enemy struck again. A new squad of Dravik soldiers stormed in through the opposite side of the chamber, weapons raised. There were too many this time, at least a dozen. Daniel cursed under his breath. His rifle was nearly out of charge. He had maybe 1 magazine left. Not enough. Not against so many. The princess turned her gaze to him, calm despite the danger. "Do what humans do best," she whispered. "Survive." The words lit a fire in him. He dropped into cover, raised his rifle, and fired. The chamber exploded in sound and fury as blaster bolts flew. Daniel moved with precision, ducking and rolling, every shot aimed to kill. But for every soldier that fell, 2 more pressed forward. A bolt seared past his shoulder, another slammed into the wall near his head. His rifle hissed empty. He drew his knife, steel gleaming in the firelight, and leapt at the nearest Dravik. The fight turned brutal, close and bloody. Steel clashed against armor, sparks flying. Daniel fought like a man possessed, fueled by desperation and duty. His blade found weak points, his fists struck where metal failed to cover. He moved like survival itself, every instinct screaming at him to keep going. Keep fighting. At last, the last soldier fell, armor cracked, weapon clattering to the floor. Daniel staggered, blood running down his arm from a fresh cut, his chest heaving with breath. He turned to the princess, who had not moved, her blue eyes watching him with a strange, unreadable expression. "You are human," she said at last. Not a question, a statement. Daniel wiped the sweat and blood from his face. "Yeah, now let's get you out of here before this whole place comes down." But instead of moving, she stepped closer. Her gaze never left him. "You risked your life for me," she said quietly. "Among my people, such courage demands an answer." Daniel frowned, confused. "What answer?" The station shook violently, fire roaring louder around them, but her next words cut through all the chaos like a blade. "Marriage," she said. "If I live because of you, then my life belongs to you. And by our law, that means I am yours." Daniel froze, his mind spinning. He had come here to save her, not this. The alarm screamed. The chamber cracked and groaned. And Daniel Reed, soldier of Earth, found himself staring into the eyes of an alien princess who had just asked for his hand in the most impossible way. The station was dying. Metal groaned like the bones of a wounded giant, and fire chewed through the corridors. The alarms wailed without pause, a desperate cry warning everyone still alive. Leave now or be buried in the void. Captain Daniel Reed didn't need convincing. He grabbed the alien princess by the arm, pulling her gently but firmly toward the exit. "We have to move," he shouted over the roar of collapsing steel. But she resisted only for a moment. Her eyes were fixed on him, calm but intense, the memory of her last words still hanging between them like a blade suspended in the air. Marriage. Daniel tried not to think about it. He couldn't, not now. The enemy could still be anywhere, and the station wouldn't last another 10 minutes. Survival first. Questions later. "Stay behind me," he ordered. "And don't stop." This time she followed. Together they sprinted down the wrecked corridor. The walls burned with heat, emergency lights flashing across their faces. Daniel kept his rifle ready, though it was nearly dry. His knife, still red from the last fight, swung at his side. The princess moved with surprising speed, her long steps sure and balanced even on the tilted floor. She carried herself like someone who had trained for war, not like a helpless royal. Still, she had no weapon, and Daniel knew it was on him to keep them both alive. "Where's the evac point?" she asked, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Docking bay," Daniel said, glancing at his wrist display. The map flickered with static but still pointed the way. "If we can reach my shuttle, we're clear." They rounded a corner and froze. The docking bay was blocked. The blast doors had sealed shut, molten at the edges from a direct hit. Sparks spat from broken panels and thick smoke poured into the hallway. Daniel slammed a fist against the metal. "Damn it." The princess tilted her head, studying the sealed doors with sharp eyes. "There is another way." Daniel turned to her, startled. "You know this station?" "I was raised here," she said simply. "Follow me." She moved without waiting for his reply, slipping into a narrow side passage half hidden by fallen beams. Daniel hesitated for only a second before following. The space was tight, filled with hanging cables and hissing pipes. The air reeked of smoke and oil. They crawled and climbed, the sound of distant explosions echoing through the ducts. Daniel felt sweat dripping down his face, mixing with soot. He kept glancing at the princess, surprised at how effortlessly she navigated the maze. Finally, they emerged into a maintenance bay, a smaller chamber with access tunnels leading outward. "There," she said, pointing. A hatch on the far side of the room glowed with emergency lights. "That tunnel connects to the shuttle ring." Relief surged through Daniel. "Good, let's move." But as they crossed the chamber, heavy footsteps thundered behind them. The hair on the back of Daniel's neck rose. He spun just as a new squad of Dravik soldiers burst through the far door. "Run!" Daniel barked. The princess didn't argue. She dashed for the hatch, her silver hair catching the firelight as she moved. Daniel raised his rifle and fired what little energy remained. Bolts ripped through the chamber, slowing the enemy but not stopping them. Click. Empty. Daniel dropped the useless rifle and drew his knife again. He could feel his muscles screaming in protest, his wounds burning, but there was no choice. He had to buy her time. He charged. The clash was brutal, metal against metal, steel against claws. Daniel fought like a man with nothing left to lose. Each strike was fueled by raw instinct, each block by sheer will. The Dravik were larger, stronger, armored, but he was faster, desperate, human. One soldier went down. Then another, but more kept coming. Just as Daniel felt his strength faltering, a bright flash split the chamber. The nearest Dravik screamed, their armor glowing white-hot. The princess stood at the hatch, a small device in her hand, smoke curling from its core. "Move," she shouted. Daniel didn't question it. He broke free, sprinted across the chamber, and dove through the hatch beside her. Together they slammed it shut, sealing the survivors inside. For a long moment, Both of them leaned against the wall, breathing hard. "You fight with madness," the princess said at last. Her tone unreadable. Daniel managed a weak laugh. "Humans call it survival." Her gaze softened just slightly. "And yet you risked all of it for me." Daniel wiped blood from his face, shaking his head. "Because it was the mission." She tilted her head, her voice quiet but firm. "No, it was more than mission. I see it in your eyes." Daniel didn't answer. He couldn't. He only pushed off the wall and nodded down the tunnel. "We're not safe yet. Let's go." They walked in silence, the echo of their steps filling the narrow space. The tunnel stretched long and dark, the sound of the collapsing station fading behind them. Finally, the princess spoke again. "You do not understand my people," she said. "When a life is saved, a bond is forged. Stronger than law, older than kings. By saving me, you have claimed me. That is why I spoke of marriage." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Back on Earth, we don't work like that." "Earth," she repeated softly, as if tasting the word. Then her eyes met his, calm and bright even in the shadows. "Perhaps our ways are different. But my word is true. I am bound to you, human. Whether you wish it or not." Daniel didn't respond. He just kept walking, every step heavier than the last. The tunnel ended with a blast door. Beyond it lay the shuttle ring, and maybe their chance at survival. But as Daniel reached for the controls, one thought burned in his mind louder than the alarms. He had come here to save an alien princess. He had not come here to take a wife. The hatch hissed open. Daniel Reed guided the princess through, rifle raised though it was nearly empty. Beyond the door stretched the shuttle ring, a curved walkway that circled the outer rim of the station. Half the lights were dead. The other half flickered like dying candles. Fires burned in distant corners. The floor shuddered under their boots, every tremor a reminder that the station was only minutes from tearing itself apart. There, Daniel pointed. His shuttle was docked just ahead, a sleek Earth-made craft with scarred plating and a glowing engine core. Small but fast. The only way out. They hurried forward, their footsteps echoing in the hollow corridor. Daniel's eyes darted to every shadow, every open hatch. The Dravik could still be anywhere. When they reached the shuttle, he keyed the hatch. The door slid open with a groan. Daniel ushered the princess inside first, then followed, sealing it shut behind them. For the first time since the chaos began, Daniel allowed himself a breath. He dropped into the pilot's seat, fingers flying over the controls. Systems flickered alive, green lights one by one. The shuttle trembled as the engines powered up. Behind him, the princess stood silent, her blue eyes fixed on him. "Strap in," he said without looking back. She did not move. "Do you trust your craft?" Daniel almost smiled despite the tension. "More than I trust this station, that's for sure." He punched the release. The shuttle jerked free of its docking clamps, sliding out into the star-strewn void. The sight before them was both beautiful and terrifying. The station loomed behind, torn open in several places, bleeding fire and smoke into space. Enemy ships prowled the edges, their red lights glowing like the eyes of predators. Daniel gritted his teeth. "Hold on!" The shuttle's engines roared and they shot forward. Immediately, alarms screamed. Enemy fighters peeled away from the station, curving toward them in sharp pursuit. "Of course," Daniel muttered. He yanked the controls, sending the shuttle into a hard dive. Stars blurred past. Beams of energy streaked across the void, missing them by inches. The princess gripped the seat beside her, steady but unreadable. "Can your ship outrun them?" Daniel's jaw clenched. "It'll have to." The chase was brutal. Enemy fire lit up the black like lightning, each near miss rattling the shuttle. Daniel flew with sharp, desperate movements, weaving through debris and broken chunks of the station. A massive panel of twisted steel drifted past, glowing from fire. Daniel spun around it just as a blast seared by. The princess never cried out, never flinched. She only watched, her gaze calm and strange, as though measuring him. At last, Daniel spotted a narrow gap in the wreckage. Beyond it lay the open void, free space. If they could slip through, they might just escape. He pushed the throttle. The shuttle screamed, every bolt straining. They shot through the gap, debris scraping the hull. Enemy fighters followed, but slower, cautious. Daniel seized the chance. He swung the shuttle around, fired the last of his defensive charges, and sent the wreckage collapsing behind them. The gap sealed in a storm of twisted metal and fire. The enemy fighters pulled back, cut off. Silence. Daniel let out a long breath, slumping back in his chair. His hands shook on the controls. "We're clear," he said, more to himself than her. For a while, neither of them spoke. The stars stretched endless and cold around them, the shuttle drifting in the void. Finally, Daniel turned. "We'll head for the nearest relay station. From there I can—" "You saved me again," the princess interrupted softly. Daniel frowned. "That's what I came here to do." Her gaze met his, unblinking. "And again, you risked your life. You could have fled alone, yet you chose not to. My people would see this as binding." Daniel leaned back, exhausted. "You keep saying that. Binding, marriage, all of it. But where I come from, saving someone doesn't mean ownership." Her head tilted, silver hair falling across her shoulder. "It is not ownership. It is union. Life for life. When one saves another, the bond is eternal. To break it would dishonor both." Daniel rubbed his face with a hand. He was bone-tired, his wounds aching, but the weight of her words pressed heavier than any injury. "Look, I respect your traditions, I do. But I didn't save you for that. I saved you because it was right. Because nobody deserves to die like that." Silence stretched. The hum of the engines filled the small cabin. At last she spoke again, her voice quiet but firm. "Perhaps that is why it must be you. Humans act not for law or bond, but for choice. That makes you dangerous. And worthy." Daniel looked away, staring out at the stars. He didn't have an answer. Minutes passed. His shuttle drifted toward safety, but inside the air felt charged, heavy with unspoken truths. The princess finally sat down, folding her hands in her lap. "You do not accept my vow, not yet. But know this, Daniel Reed of Earth, I will not break mine. Whether you deny me or not, my life is bound to yours." Her words settled like a shadow in the cabin. Daniel closed his eyes, exhaustion washing over him. He had survived the battle, escaped the station, even shaken off enemy pursuit. But he couldn't shake her words. A mission was supposed to end with survival, extraction, and debrief. Clean, simple. But this mission had left him with something far more complicated. An alien princess who believed she was his wife. And Daniel had no idea what would come next. The relay station floated in orbit like a lone fortress, its massive dish arrays turning slowly against the backdrop of stars. It was a neutral hub, a place where soldiers, traders, and refugees crossed paths. Its shields glowed faintly, holding back the emptiness of space. Daniel Reed guided his shuttle into the docking lanes, sweat still cooling on his skin from the battle. He kept his voice steady as he spoke into the comm. "Shuttle Aegis 9 requesting emergency dock. 2 souls aboard. Priority clearance, station collapse behind us." Static hissed, then a voice crackled back. "Copy Aegis 9 docking bay 12. Stand by for scan." Daniel nodded, maneuvering the shuttle into the bay. The doors opened, swallowing them into the safe glow of the hangar. The engines powered down with a long sigh. Silence followed, broken only by the ticking of cooling metal. Daniel unstrapped and turned to the alien princess. She sat composed as though she hadn't just lived through fire and battle. Her blue eyes lingered on him. "Stay close," he said. "Not everyone here will welcome you." She gave the faintest smile. "I have already learned that humans enjoy underestimating me." Daniel didn't answer. He opened the hatch and stepped out. The hangar buzzed with activity. Dock hands guiding ships, repair crews welding, security patrols moving in pairs. Daniel walked fast, the princess gliding silently behind him. Heads turned. Whispers spread. A human soldier, bloodied but alive. And at his side, a figure unmistakably alien, her silver hair shimmering under the harsh lights. They reached the security checkpoint. 2 officers in dark uniforms blocked their path, rifles at the ready. "Identification," one demanded. Daniel handed over his ID chip. The officer scanned it, frowning. "Captain Reed, Earth Forces. Your records show a mission in Dravik territory." His gaze flicked to the princess. "And she is?" Daniel hesitated. "Classified. She's under my protection." The officer's frown deepened. "Classified? On whose authority?" Before Daniel could answer, the princess stepped forward. She raised her chin, her voice carrying with quiet authority. "I am Princess Elira of the Elori Dominion," she said. "Last of my line. You will treat me with respect." The officer blinked, stunned. The second guard muttered something under his breath. Fear or disbelief, Daniel couldn't tell. Daniel sighed. So much for keeping her quiet. The officer handed back Daniel's ID, his voice low. "You'd better get her out of sight. Word of this gets around and every faction in this sector will be at your throat. Some to protect her, most to claim her. Daniel nodded stiffly and pushed forward, leading Elira into the station's inner corridors. They found a quiet room in the refugee wing, small, plain, but secure. Daniel checked the locks twice before finally allowing himself to sit. His wounds ached and exhaustion weighed on him, but his mind refused to rest. Elira stood by the window looking out at the endless scatter of stars. Her reflection glowed faintly against the glass. "You risk much bringing me here," she said softly. Daniel rubbed his temples. "I didn't have a choice. You wouldn't have survived out there alone." Her gaze shifted to him, calm but sharp. "And again you speak of survival as though that is all. Yet you still do not see what you mean to me," Daniel groaned. "Not this again." "You saved me twice," she said, stepping closer. "And by our law, twice binds stronger than once. The vow is sealed. My life is yours." Daniel met her eyes, his voice hard. "Listen, where I come from, people don't get married because of laws or vows. They get married because they choose to. Because they want to." Elira tilted her head. "Do you not see? That is why I choose you." Her words froze him. For a moment he had no reply. Then, before he could think of one, the door alarm chirped. Someone outside. Daniel stood instantly, weapon in hand. He motioned for Elira to stay back. The lock hissed, the door sliding open, and 3 men in ragged clothes stepped in. Not soldiers, smugglers. Their eyes gleamed with greed as they saw Elira. "Well, well," the leader sneered. "Looks like Captain Reed brought himself a prize." Daniel tightened his grip on his weapon. "Back off," the smuggler chuckled. "Relax, Captain. We don't want trouble. Just the alien. You hand her over and nobody gets hurt." Elira's eyes narrowed, cold and sharp. "I am not yours to take." The smugglers laughed. Daniel stepped forward, weapon raised. His voice dropped to steel. "I said back off." The room tensed, heavy with the promise of violence, and for Daniel, the choice was already made. He had fought through fire, through enemy soldiers, through the collapse of a station. He wasn't about to hand her over now. Not to them, not to anyone. The room seemed to shrink. 3 smugglers stood inside, grinning like jackals. The leader's hand hovered near the pistol on his hip. The 2 behind him shifted impatiently, eyes fixed on Elira as if she were a prize chest waiting to be opened. Daniel Reed stood in front of her, weapon steady. His pulse hammered, but his voice was calm. "This is your only warning. Walk away," the leader smirked. "And miss the bounty on that royal head?" Not a chance. The pistol came up. Daniel moved first. His rifle barked once, the shot slamming into the wall beside the smuggler's hand. Sparks showered across the floor. The man cursed and fired back. The room exploded into chaos. Daniel rolled aside, shots tearing holes where he had stood. He fired twice more, one smuggler dropping with a scream, the other diving for cover. "Stay down," he shouted to Elira. But she didn't. Instead, she snatched a shard of broken metal from the floor, her body moving with sudden, sharp grace. When the second smuggler lunged from cover, she met him head-on, driving the shard deep into the weak joint of his armor. He collapsed with a howl. Daniel stared, stunned for half a heartbeat. She fought like someone who had trained, not like a sheltered royal. The leader cursed, swinging his pistol toward her. Daniel fired before he could. The shot struck true. The man staggered, fell, and lay still. Silence. The smell of scorched metal and ozone hung heavy in the air. Daniel lowered his rifle, breathing hard. Elira stood over the fallen smuggler, her shard dripping. Her blue eyes met Daniel's, calm as ice. "You told me to stay down," she said softly. Daniel swallowed. "You're full of surprises." She dropped the shard and wiped her hands clean. "My people do not raise helpless heirs. A crown means nothing if you cannot defend it." Before Daniel could reply, the door alarm blared again. More footsteps thundered in the hall. "Damn it," Daniel muttered. "They've got friends." He grabbed Elira's hand. "We're leaving. Now." They sprinted down the corridor, alarms echoing behind them. The station was alive with noise now, shouts, boots, the distant wail of sirens. Word of the princess must have spread faster than fire. Everywhere they turned, eyes followed. Some filled with fear, others with greed. Whispers raced ahead of them. The Aelori princess, the last heir. Daniel pushed harder, leading her through twisting corridors past markets and hangars. The station was a maze, and every corner felt like a trap. "Where?" Elira asked, her voice steady despite the chaos. Back to the shuttle, Daniel said. It's the only way out. They turned a corner and stopped cold. A squad of armed mercenaries blocked the path. Heavily armored, weapons raised. No smuggler rabble this time, professionals. The leader pointed his rifle at Elira. By order of the Dravic Empire, he barked. The princess is ours. Daniel cursed under his breath. No way out. Too many to fight. He glanced at Elira. Her eyes met his, unwavering. Remember what you said, she whispered. Humans survive, Daniel's mind raced. Guns, numbers, no cover, suicide. Unless, his gaze darted upward. Above the mercenaries, a wide cargo net hung loaded with heavy crates, suspended by a magnetic lock. He fired once, sharp and precise. The lock shattered. The crates came crashing down in a thunderous avalanche. The mercenaries scattered, shouting, half their number buried under the debris. Daniel seized the moment. Go, he shouted. They bolted past, weaving through the chaos. Shots rang out behind them, sizzling past, but they didn't stop. Daniel's lungs burned, his legs heavy, but he pushed on. At last, the docking bay came into view. Their shuttle waited, battered but ready. Almost there, Daniel gasped. Then a shot cracked past his ear, slamming into the wall. More mercenaries poured into the bay, cutting off the shuttle. Daniel skidded to a halt, chest heaving. He raised his rifle only for it to click empty. For a moment, despair clawed at him. Trapped again. But Elira stepped forward, her voice ringing clear. I am Princess Elira of Alori. Last of my line. You will not take me. Her words boomed across the bay, silencing even the mercenaries. For an instant, every eye was on her, stunned, uncertain. Daniel seized it. He lunged forward, ripped a sidearm from the nearest mercenary, and fired. The bay erupted into chaos once more. Together, side by side, they fought their way through, each step dragging them closer to the shuttle. Daniel fired until his hands ached. Elira moved with fierce precision, striking with every chance she had. At last, they reached the ramp. Daniel shoved her aboard, firing one last burst before diving in after her. The hatch slammed shut. The engines roared. As the shuttle tore free of the bay, the station behind them dissolved into fire and confusion. Inside, Daniel collapsed into the pilot's seat, blood and sweat dripping down his face. He looked at Elira, who stood tall despite it all, silver hair wild, eyes blazing. You fight like a human, he muttered, almost in awe. She smiled faintly. And you protect like an Aelori. Daniel shook his head, pushing the shuttle into hyperspace. Stars stretched into lines of light. For now, they were safe. But in his gut, Daniel knew the chase was only beginning. The shuttle hummed softly as it cut through hyperspace. Stars stretched like rivers of light across the windows, painting the cabin in silver and blue. For the first time since the station's fall, there was no sound of gunfire, no alarms, no shouting, only silence. Daniel Reed leaned back in the pilot's chair, exhaustion finally pressing heavy on him. His wounds stung, his body begged for rest, but his mind refused. He kept one eye on the console, watching the steady pulse of the engines. They were safe. For now. Behind him, Elira sat quietly, her posture graceful even in the cramped shuttle. She had cleaned the blood from her hands, her silver hair falling loose around her shoulders. Her eyes were fixed on the streaking stars, yet Daniel felt her attention flicker back to him again and again. At last, she broke the silence. You are troubled. Daniel gave a short laugh, dry and weary. That obvious? You hide it well, but I see the way your hands tighten on the controls even when there is nothing chasing us. He glanced down, realizing she was right. His fingers were curled too tight, knuckles white. He forced himself to relax. Old habit. Never trust the quiet. It usually means something worse is coming. Elira tilted her head. And is that how humans live? Always waiting for the next battle? Daniel shrugged. Some of us. Soldiers, at least. She studied him for a long moment, then spoke softly. You are not only a soldier. I have seen it. The way you look at the stars. The way you fight not for orders, but for people. That is not the work of a soldier. That is the heart of something more. Her words unsettled him. He cleared his throat, looking back at the controls. Where I come from, people don't think much about hearts when they're trying not to get killed. And yet, she said, your heart still guides you. Daniel had no answer for that. Silence lingered. The hum of the shuttle wrapped around them like a blanket. Finally, Daniel turned in his seat, meeting her eyes. I need to ask. Back there, On the station, on the relay, every time you said I was bound to you, married, were you serious? Her gaze didn't waver. Completely. Daniel rubbed his face with both hands. But you barely know me. We've spent, what, hours together? Where I'm from, marriage isn't about debt or vows. It's about choice. About wanting to build a life with someone. That takes time. Her expression softened, though her voice remained steady. I do not speak of debt. I speak of truth. In my culture, saving a life is not a transaction. It is a recognition. A soul touches another and says, you matter more than my death. That is what you have done for me, twice. Daniel's chest tightened. He wanted to argue, but her words struck deep. And you? She asked suddenly. What do humans see in marriage? Daniel hesitated. It's different for everyone. Some see it as duty, some as tradition. But for me? He paused, searching for words. It means trust. Choosing someone even when you don't have to. Staying, even when it's hard. That's marriage where I'm from. Illyra's blue eyes shone in the dim light. Then perhaps we are not so different. You choose with trust. I choose with vow. Both are binding. Both are true. Daniel shook his head, but a small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. You're impossible, you know that? And yet you are still here, she replied, the faintest curve of a smile touching her lips. For a moment, the weight of war and death seemed far away. Just a human soldier and an alien princess drifting between stars. But the moment did not last. The console beeped sharply. Daniel turned, scanning the readouts. His stomach sank. What is it? Illyra asked, her voice calm. Daniel's hands moved across the controls. Tracking signal. We're being followed, her eyes narrowed. Dravik? Has to be. They must have tagged us back at the relay. The ship shuddered as a warning light flashed red. Enemy vessels closing fast. Daniel cursed under his breath. So much for peace and quiet. Illyra rose, standing tall despite the cramped cabin. Her voice was steady, resolute. Then we faced them, together. Daniel looked up at her, meeting her gaze. Her blue eyes burned with unshakable fire. For the first time, he didn't see just a princess. He saw a partner. He tightened his grip on the controls, adrenaline replacing fatigue. Together then, the shuttle trembled again, alarms screaming. The stars outside warped as enemy ships tore into view, and the chase began anew. The shuttle shook as enemy ships closed in, their red lights cutting through the void like hunting eyes. Alarms screamed, warning of missile locks and weapons charging. Daniel Reed's hands flew across the controls, pushing the little craft harder than it was ever meant to go. The engines roared, the hull groaned, but the gap between them and the Dravik warships narrowed with every passing second. We can't outrun them, he muttered through clenched teeth. Illyra stood behind him, calm, even as the cabin trembled. Her blue eyes shone with steady fire. Then we do not run. We fight. Daniel barked a dry laugh. This shuttle isn't built for a fight. Then we use more than the shuttle, she said. We use ourselves. Before he could ask what she meant, the console flashed red. A missile screamed toward them, closing fast. Daniel swore and pulled the shuttle into a desperate roll. The missile skimmed past, detonating close enough to rattle every bolt in the hull. The blast hurled them sideways, sparks flying across the cockpit. Daniel gritted his teeth. This isn't gonna hold. Illyra stepped forward, placing her hand on his shoulder. There is a way, but you must trust me. Daniel shot her a glance. Trust you how? Her expression was unshakable. My people carry a weapon older than the Dravik, older than this war. It lies in the bond between lives. You have saved me. Twice. If you accept my vow, the power of that bond can be called. Daniel stared at her, sweat and blood streaking his face. You're saying marriage now in the middle of a firefight? Yes, she said simply. Now, or we both die. Another explosion rocked the shuttle. Daniel looked at the screens. 3 Dravik fighters, weapons hot, circling in for the kill. He had seconds to decide. His heart pounded. He thought of Earth, of the mission, of survival. And then he thought of her standing tall amid fire, of her vow, of her eyes that never wavered. Daniel drew in a sharp breath. All right, I accept. Illyra's hand tightened on his shoulder. Then speak it. Say you claim me. Daniel's throat felt dry, but he forced the words out steady and firm. I claim you, Illyra. My life to yours. Her eyes blazed like stars. And I am yours, Daniel Reed. My life to yours. The cabin filled with a sudden pulse of light, warm and fierce. Daniel felt it surge through his veins. Strength, clarity, a fire unlike anything he had known. The shuttle's systems flickered, then flared brighter, power readings spiking beyond their limits. "What the hell?" he gasped. "The bond," Alira said, her voice resonant. "It answers." The Dravik ships opened fire, but Daniel moved faster, his hands steady as steel. The shuttle spun with impossible precision, dodging every beam. The engine screamed, pushing beyond safe limits, but the ship held together as though wrapped in unseen armor. He fired back. Bolts of energy ripped from the shuttle's guns, stronger than they had any right to be. One enemy ship burst apart in a storm of fire. The other two closed in, but Daniel felt no fear. He and Alira moved as one, his hands on the controls, her voice guiding. Their bond a current that flowed between them. Another burst. Another Dravik ship shattered. The last fighter circled, hesitant now. Daniel pressed forward, driving straight into the enemy's line of fire. Alira's hand gripped his arm, her voice fierce. "Now, Daniel." He pulled the trigger. The blast tore through the final fighter, ripping it apart in a brilliant explosion. Silence followed. Only the hum of the shuttle remained, steady and strong. The void stretched wide around them, empty now of enemies. Daniel slumped back in his seat, chest heaving. We did it!" Alira stood tall, her gaze on the stars. "No, we did it." He looked up at her, truly seeing her, not just a mission, not just a princess, but a partner. Bound not by orders, but by choice. "You know this makes us married by your law," Daniel said, a hint of a smile breaking through his exhaustion. Alira turned to him, her expression soft but resolute. "And by yours as well, Daniel Reed. You chose me when you could have refused. That is trust. That is union." He shook his head, still half in disbelief. "Guess I'm a husband now." Her smile widened, the first genuine warmth he had seen on her face since they met. "And I a wife. Together not just for survival, but for the stars ahead." The shuttle drifted through hyperspace, carrying them toward an uncertain future. War still raged. Enemies still hunted. But for the first time, Daniel felt something stronger than survival driving him forward. Hope. And beside him, a princess who was no longer just a passenger, but his equal. His bond. His partner in every battle to come. Together they had faced fire and death. Together they would face the future, and together they would prove humanity is never to be underestimated.